Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, released in 2006, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. There's something about the streets of Tokyo that makes them the perfect backdrop for a high-octane, underground racing scene. The neon glow reflecting off the pavement, the sound of engines roaring through the night, and the unmistakable thrill of speed. It's all there, woven into the very fabric of The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift. This isn't just another chapter in the Fast and Furious franchise. This is a movie that takes the racing culture and injects it with a whole new style, energy, and an entirely different set of rules. Unlike its predecessors, this film shifts the focus away from the familiar streets of Los Angeles and straight into the heart of Tokyo, where a unique form of street racing, drifting, dominates the underground scene. Here, it's not just about speed, it's about control. It's about precision, about knowing exactly how to maneuver every turn at breakneck speed without losing grip, without spinning out, without crashing into the towering walls of the city. Drifting isn't just a racing style, it's an art, and in Tokyo, it's everything. At the center of it all is Sean Boswell, played by Lucas Black, a rebellious high school student with a need for speed and a history of getting into trouble. When his illegal street racing in the U.S. lands him in hot water one too many times, he's sent to Tokyo to live with his estranged father. But what's meant to be a chance to turn over a new leaf quickly turns into something else entirely. Sean is drawn to the underground drift racing scene, a world where skill outweighs brute horsepower and where every race is a matter of pride, power, and sometimes even survival. The movie wastes no time introducing the audience to the fast-paced, adrenaline-fueled culture of Tokyo's racing world. The underground car meets, the tight-knit groups of drivers, the dangerous stakes that come with losing a race, everything is different here. The hierarchy is clear. If you can't drift, you don't belong. And for Sean, who has always relied on speed over finesse, that's a problem. He quickly finds himself outmatched by the reigning king of the Tokyo streets, Takashi DK, Drift King, played by Brian T. DK isn't just a skilled racer. He's connected to the Yakuza, the powerful crime syndicate that controls much of the underground world in Tokyo. Losing to him isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. But every underdog needs a mentor, and Sean finds one in Han Lu, played by the effortlessly cool Kang. Han isn't just another racer. He's someone who sees potential in Sean, someone who believes that racing is about more than just winning. He takes Sean under his wing, teaching him the art of drifting, showing him that speed is only one piece of the puzzle. But Han's involvement in the Tokyo racing scene isn't without risks. He's got his own enemies, his own secrets, and the deeper Sean gets into this world, the clearer it becomes that there's more at stake than just bragging rights. The film's racing sequences are where it truly shines. The action is relentless, the drift sequences are beautifully choreographed, and the sheer visual spectacle of watching cars slide through the neon-lit streets of Tokyo is mesmerizing. Whether it's the iconic race through a crowded parking garage, where Sean first learns the brutal reality of drifting, or the breathtaking final showdown on the treacherous mountain roads, every race feels intense, immersive, and, most importantly, real. The film doesn't rely on over-the-top CGI. Instead, it uses practical stunt driving, real cars, and skilled drivers to pull off some of the most incredible sequences in the franchise. But underneath the action, there's a deeper story about finding identity, proving oneself, and learning the value of respect. Sean isn't just fighting to win races. He's fighting to carve out a place for himself in a world that sees him as an outsider. Han, in many ways, represents the kind of racer Sean could become. Calm, collected, and always playing the long game. Their friendship is the emotional core of the film, and it makes what happens later all the more devastating. As Sean rises through the ranks and begins to challenge DK's dominance, tensions escalate. The Yakuza ties become impossible to ignore, and suddenly, the consequences of racing are no longer just about losing a car, they're about survival. When betrayals are revealed, when loyalties are tested, and when the reality of this world hits harder than any crash, Sean has no choice but to face DK in a final, high-stakes race where only one of them will walk away with their reputation intact. And just when you think it's over, Tokyo Drift delivers one final twist, a moment that changed the entire franchise forever. A mysterious racer appears, one who knows Han, one who carries a reputation of his own. And in a moment that sent fans into a frenzy, that driver is none other than Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel himself. His appearance, though brief, connected Tokyo Drift to the larger Fast and Furious universe in a way that no one saw coming, setting the stage for everything that followed. The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift is more than just a spin-off or a detour in the franchise. It's a film that brought a new style of racing, a new setting, and one of the most beloved characters in the series into the spotlight. It took risks, it embraced a different culture of car racing, and it gave fans some of the most thrilling, grounded, and visually stunning racing sequences in the franchise's history. Whether you came for the cars, the action, or just the sheer love of drifting, this movie delivered an unforgettable ride. And if you're still thinking about that final race, about the roar of the engines echoing through the Tokyo streets, about Han's effortless cool and the way he made driving look like an art form, don't worry. You're not alone. There's a reason why Tokyo Drift remains a fan favorite in the franchise. It's not just about speed. It's about style, skill, and the respect that comes with proving you belong on the streets. The sound of an engine revving cuts through the air like a battle cry. The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift doesn't waste any time setting the tone. It's all about speed, rebellion, and proving yourself behind the wheel. And at the center of it all is Sean Boswell, a high school senior with a reckless streak and a love for racing. He's not the kind of guy who backs down from a challenge, even when the stakes are sky high. The story kicks off in Arizona, where Sean is already an outsider in his own world. He's not the rich kid, not the football star. He's just the guy who drives fast and gets into trouble for it. And true to form, when a local jock taunts him into a race, Sean doesn't hesitate. The race isn't just about cars, it's about pride, about proving who's really in control. But this isn't a controlled track. It's a construction site, filled with tight corners, dangerous obstacles, and no room for mistakes. Both drivers push their cars to the limit, but Sean has something the other guy doesn't: instinct. He knows how to push past fear, how to maneuver through chaos. But the race quickly spirals into disaster. The cars crash, metal twisting and sparks flying. Both drivers push their cars to the limit, but Sean has something the other guy doesn't: instinct. He knows how to push past fear, how to maneuver through chaos. But the race quickly spirals into disaster. The cars crash, metal twisting and sparks flying. Sean survives, but the damage is done, not just to the cars, but to his future. His reckless driving record has finally caught up to him. With no other options, Sean's mother makes a drastic decision. She sends him to Tokyo to live with his father, a strict military man who sees Sean as nothing more than a troublemaker in need of discipline. The contrast couldn't be sharper. The wild, open roads of Arizona are replaced by Tokyo's tight, neon-lit streets, filled with cars that weave through traffic with impossible precision. Everything moves faster here. People, technology, the very heartbeat of the city. Sean doesn't belong. He sticks out in school, not just because of his American attitude, but because he doesn't understand the rules of the world he's been thrown into. But despite the culture shock, there's one thing that instantly catches his attention: the cars. Tokyo's car culture is unlike anything he's ever seen. Sleek, modified vehicles drift through the streets with perfect control, their drivers commanding the asphalt with an elegance Sean has never experienced. But racing here isn't just about going fast. It's about style, precision, and knowing how to drift, a technique that allows cars to slide through tight corners at high speeds without losing control. Through a new friend, Twinkie, Sean gets his first glimpse into the underground racing world of Tokyo. And there, standing at the top of it all, is Takashi, better known as DK, Drift King. DK is more than just a racer. He's connected to the Yakuza, and his dominance on the track is as much about power as it is about skill. Nobody challenges him. Nobody dares. But Sean doesn't care about any of that. He sees Neela, DK's girlfriend, and, as expected, he does what he always does. He pushes the boundaries. Their connection is subtle at first, but it's enough to make DK feel threatened. And in Tokyo's racing world, you don't settle things with words. You settle them on the streets. So, of course, Sean does what he does best. He races. He doesn't think about the consequences, doesn't stop to consider what kind of enemy he's making. All he knows is that he's got a car, an open road, and someone standing in his way. But this is Tokyo. And here, speed isn't enough. The race against DK is brutal. The moment Sean takes off, it's clear. He has no idea what he's doing. Drifting isn't about acceleration. It's about control, about knowing how to move with the car instead of against it. Every turn Sean takes is a disaster. He slams into barriers, spins out, completely outclassed by DK's effortless mastery of the technique. By the end of it, Sean is humiliated, his car in pieces, his reputation shattered before it could even begin. But more importantly, he's now on DK's radar, and not in a good way. Enter Han. Han is different from the others. He's not just a racer, he's someone who plays the long game. While DK thrives on intimidation and dominance, Han operates on calculated moves and quiet confidence. And for some reason, he sees something in Sean. Maybe it's his recklessness, maybe it's his refusal to back down, maybe it's just that Han enjoys watching chaos unfold. Whatever the reason, he decides to take Sean under his wing. But learning to drift isn't easy. Han doesn't just throw Sean into another car and tell him to try again. Instead, he makes him earn it. The first lesson? Control. Sean's first real experience with drifting doesn't happen on the streets. It happens in an empty, quiet lot, surrounded by stacks of cargo containers. Han hands him the keys and tells him to drift around a small circular space. Simple, right? Wrong. Every attempt ends in failure, spinning out, losing control, crashing into obstacles. But Han, he just watches, smirking, giving cryptic advice that doesn't make sense to Sean in the moment but will eventually define everything he knows about racing. You have to feel it, Han tells him. It's not about speed. It's about balance. You have to learn how to let go. It's frustrating. It's humiliating. But for the first time, Sean isn't racing to win. He's racing to learn. Meanwhile, DK is growing more suspicious. He can feel something shifting. Sean isn't just a foreigner causing trouble. He's becoming a threat. And threats need to be eliminated. But the biggest moment of Sean's new life in Tokyo comes when Han finally throws him into the real thing. A night race, one that will either break him or make him. The scene is breathtaking. Tokyo at night, the streets alive with the glow of neon signs, engines roaring as racers line up, the tension hanging thick in the air. Sean steps up. He grips the wheel. He knows he's not ready, but he also knows that backing down isn't an option. The signal flashes. And then he drives. The night air is thick with the smell of burnt rubber. Engines roar through the neon-lit streets of Tokyo, tires screeching as they slide dangerously close to the metal barriers lining the roads. The underground racing world of Tokyo is alive, and at its center, Sean Boswell is no longer just a reckless outsider. He's a racer, a drifter, a man with something to prove. But this isn't just about racing anymore. The stakes have shifted, the danger is real, and the consequences of every decision he makes could be life or death. Under Han's guidance, Sean has finally learned how to drift. He no longer fights the car. He moves with it, feels every turn, every shift in weight, every moment where control teeters on the edge of disaster. But in Tokyo, skill alone isn't enough. Reputation is everything, and Sean has already made enemies in places he shouldn't have. Takashi, DK, Drift King, is watching, and he sees what's happening. Sean is rising. Han is backing him. Neal is drifting away from him. DK isn't just losing his grip on the racing scene, he's losing control over his entire world. And for someone like him, someone with Yakuza ties, family expectations, and a legacy to uphold, that isn't just an inconvenience, it's a threat. Then, the moment everything changes, DK learns the truth about Han. For weeks, Han has been playing a dangerous game. He's been running a side business, skimming money off the top of DK's operations. It's been a silent act of rebellion, a move that he knew would come back to bite him. And now, DK has proof. Everything explodes in an instant. DK storms into Han's garage with rage in his eyes and a gun in his hand. His men follow, ready for blood. Han, ever the smooth operator, keeps his cool, but the tension is suffocating. Sean and Neal are caught in the middle, standing between a man with nothing to lose and a man who has spent his life knowing that sooner or later the past would catch up to him. Then, all hell breaks loose. Han makes a break for it. A chase erupts through the Tokyo streets, one of the most intense, high-speed pursuits ever put to film. DK is hunting him down. Bullets fly, tires spin, cars weave through traffic at impossible speeds. Sean is right there in the chaos, pushing his car to the limit, dodging pedestrians, sliding between trucks, trying to keep up. But Tokyo is a city of sharp turns and tight alleys. And then, the moment no one saw coming. Han's car is clipped. It spirals out of control, flipping, rolling, crashing. The explosion is instant, violent, a burst of fire that lights up the night. Everything stops. Sean stares in horror as flames consume the wreckage. Han is gone. The weight of it is crushing. Han wasn't just a mentor. He was family, the only person who had believed in Sean, the only one who had shown him how to be more than just a reckless kid behind the wheel. And just like that, he's taken away. DK disappears into the night, but the war isn't over. Sean knows he can't run. He can't hide. The only way forward is to end this, once and for all. The next day, he walks straight into DK's world, right to Kamata, the Yakuza boss, DK's uncle. The weight of the moment is suffocating. Sean is standing in the heart of Tokyo's criminal underworld, and he's making a bold offer. Settle things with a race. If he wins, DK leaves Tokyo. If he loses, he's gone. Forever. Kamata listens. There's something about Sean's defiance, his willingness to face death head-on, that intrigues him. He agrees. One race. One final battle. No second chances. And so, it all comes down to this. The mountain roads of Tokyo. No spectators. No distractions. Just two racers, two cars, and one impossible challenge. The track is treacherous, filled with hairpin turns, sheer drops, and razor-thin pathways where one mistake means death. Sean stands beside his car, heart pounding, fingers tightening around the wheel. This isn't about proving himself anymore. This isn't about revenge. This is about finishing what Han started, about carving his own path, about showing that he belongs here. The engines roar to life. The race begins. DK takes the lead immediately, his years of experience making him nearly untouchable on these roads. He weaves through the tightest turns with precision, barely slowing down, pushing his car dangerously close to the edge. Sean struggles to keep up, but he isn't the same racer he was when he first got to Tokyo. Every turn, every drift, every movement is executed with precision. The mountain pass narrows, the drop below is lethal, but Sean refuses to back down. He remembers Han's words. You have to let go. Then, the final turn, the moment everything has been leading up to. DK, desperate to maintain his lead, takes the inside line, pushing too hard, too fast. His car spins out of control, tires screeching, metal scraping against the guardrail. And Sean? He drifts. Perfectly. Cleanly. He crosses the finish line. DK's car plunges off the road, tumbling down the cliffside in a crash that signals the end of his reign. The race is over. Kamata keeps his word. DK is done, and Sean is left standing at the top of the mountain, not just as the winner of a race, but as someone who has finally proven himself. In the end, it's not about speed. It's not about power. It's about control, respect, and knowing when to let go. And just when Sean thinks his time in Tokyo has settled, he gets an unexpected challenge. A new racer has arrived. Someone who knew Han. Someone with a reputation. Sean pulls up to the meet, and there, waiting for him, is Dominic Toretto, the legend himself. The race is about to begin. But this time, Sean isn't the underdog anymore. The streets of Tokyo are a proving ground, and every racer who burns rubber on the asphalt leaves something behind: reputation, pride, a legacy. But beneath the roaring engines and high-speed drifts, the fast and the furious, Tokyo Drift is a story about characters searching for their place in the world. Some fight for control, some fight for respect, and some just want to belong. Each of them plays a role in shaping the film's heartbeat, defining not just the action, but the meaning behind it. At the center of it all is Sean Boswell, the reckless, rebellious outsider who finds himself thrown into a world he doesn't understand. He is a drifter in every sense of the word, constantly moving from place to place, never truly fitting in. In Arizona, his love for racing made him an outcast, a troublemaker who never quite measured up to the privileged kids with money and influence. His conflicts were always the same. He raced, he got caught, and he paid the price. But when he's sent to Tokyo, everything changes. For the first time, he isn't just racing against the local jocks. He's racing against a culture, a system, an entirely new way of life. Sean isn't just learning how to drift in this movie. He's learning how to adapt, how to respect a world that doesn't revolve around him, how to earn his place rather than demand it. In the beginning, he's impulsive, brash, and convinced that raw speed is all that matters. But drifting teaches him something different: control, patience, precision. It's through the mentorship of Han and the brutal lessons he learns on the track that he starts to evolve. By the end of the film, Sean is no longer the arrogant racer who thought he could bulldoze his way through any competition. He becomes a strategist, a leader, and someone who understands that real power isn't about proving you're the best. It's about knowing when to step up and when to let go. Then there's Han Lu, the cool, unshakable presence who instantly becomes the soul of the film. Han isn't just another racer. He's the kind of man who plays the long game, always observing, always waiting, always thinking 10 steps ahead. He doesn't react with anger or impulsiveness, and that's what makes him such a powerful force. In a world dominated by egos, bravado, and men trying to prove their worth, Han is the one who never needs to prove anything, because he already knows who he is. His mentorship of Sean isn't about making him the best drifter in Tokyo. It's about teaching him a philosophy, a way of life. Han's approach to racing, to business, to people, it's all about balance, about knowing how to move within the chaos without being consumed by it. He sees potential in Sean, not because he's the best, but because he wants to be better. There's something poetic about the way Han moves through the film. He is the calm in the storm, the one person who never panics, never loses his temper, even when the world is closing in on him. But Han's fate is a reminder that Tokyo is not a place for outsiders to move freely without consequences. His past catches up with him, and in an instant, the man who seemed untouchable is gone. His death isn't just shocking, it's devastating, a loss that lingers over the franchise long after this film ends. And yet, even in death, Han's legacy remains. He changes Sean. He changes the way we see this world. And in the end, he becomes one of the most beloved characters in the entire Fast and Furious saga. On the other side of the spectrum is Takashi, aka DK, Drift King, a character consumed by the very things that Sean learns to let go of: power, reputation, and control. DK is a man who was born into his world rather than earning his place in it, and that difference defines everything about him. He has skill, yes. His drifting abilities are unmatched, his precision nearly flawless, but his power isn't just about talent. It comes from his Yakuza connections, his uncle's influence, the fear that he instills in others. And that's exactly why he sees Sean as such a threat. It's not just about Neal. It's not even about racing. It's about the fact that Sean doesn't respect the hierarchy that keeps DK in power. DK thrives in a world where people fear him, where no one questions him. But Sean doesn't care. Sean doesn't bow. Sean doesn't play by the rules. And for someone like DK, that kind of defiance is unbearable. As the film progresses, DK's unraveling is inevitable. The more Sean rises, the more DK spirals. DK thrives in a world where people fear him, where no one questions him. But Sean doesn't care. Sean doesn't bow. Sean doesn't play by the rules. And for someone like DK, that kind of defiance is unbearable. As the film progresses, DK's unraveling is inevitable. The more Sean rises, the more DK spirals. He becomes reckless, desperate, unable to control the situation as it slips through his fingers. By the time the final race happens, he's not fighting to win. He's fighting to survive. And in the end, when he loses everything, we see him for what he really is, a man who never had the control he thought he did. Then there's Neal, a character caught between two worlds. Her connection to DK is complicated. He sees her as his, as someone who belongs to him, but in reality, Neal is just as trapped as he is. She grew up in this world, surrounded by these rules, and yet she never had the freedom to choose her own path. That's why Sean intrigues her, not because he's the typical rebellious outsider, but because he represents something different, something outside of the power structures that dictate her life. Neal's story is one of quiet resistance. She doesn't break free in some dramatic act of defiance. Instead, she makes small choices, moments of rebellion that build up until, finally, she takes control of her own fate. By choosing to stand by Sean, by leaving DK's world behind, she reclaims the freedom that was denied to her for so long. And then, of course, there's Twinkie, the hustler, the middleman, the comic relief who actually serves a more important role than people give him credit for. Twinkie is the bridge between worlds. He's the guy who understands the rules, who knows how to navigate the underground without getting caught up in the drama. He's the one who introduces Sean to Tokyo's racing culture, the one who helps him find his way, the one who sticks by him even when things go sideways. Twinkie might not be a racer, but he knows the game better than most, and that's why he survives. While others are too busy fighting for power, status, and revenge, Twinkie is the one who always keeps moving, always finds a way to stay ahead. He's the smartest guy in the room, even if no one realizes it. In the end, Tokyo Drift is a film about transformation. Sean finds purpose. Han finds peace. DK loses everything. Neal finds freedom. Twinkie keeps hustling. And when the dust settles, when the final race is over and the new Drift King is crowned, Tokyo is still there, waiting for the next challenger, the next racer, the next story to unfold on its streets. And as for Sean, he's no longer just a kid running from his mistakes. He's no longer just a reckless driver looking for a race. He's the Drift King now. He's found his place. And the streets of Tokyo will never be the same again. From the moment the cameras started rolling on the Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, it was clear that this was going to be a very different kind of installment in the franchise. This wasn't just another street racing movie. This was a film that would take the audience halfway across the world, introducing them to an entirely new style of racing, new characters, and a fresh perspective on the underground racing scene. But behind the scenes, the making of this movie was just as thrilling as the high-speed drifts that defined it. From unexpected casting choices to real-life illegal racing, to some of the wildest production challenges the franchise had ever faced, Tokyo Drift became legendary not just for what happened on screen, but for the stories that unfolded behind the camera. The first major challenge? Filming in Tokyo itself. The production team quickly learned that filming in the bustling, neon-lit streets of Japan was far more complicated than they had anticipated. Unlike previous entries in the franchise, where much of the filming could be done with closed-off streets and controlled environments, Tokyo was a whole different beast. The production team struggled to get official permits for street racing scenes, and rather than fight through endless bureaucratic red tape, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Yes, you read that right. Many of the movie's street racing scenes were filmed without official permission. The crew would set up cameras in hidden locations, get the cars lined up, and then shoot the scenes as quickly as possible before local authorities could intervene. Director Justin Lin later admitted that police shut down production multiple times while they were trying to capture Tokyo's high-energy nightlife. The only way they got away with it? By working fast and disappearing before anyone could stop them. It was guerrilla filmmaking at its finest, perfectly fitting for a movie about underground street racing. But that wasn't the only unexpected hurdle. One of the biggest surprises of the film's production was the casting of Lucas Black as Sean Boswell. Black, known for his work in Friday Night Lights, had no prior connection to the Fast and Furious franchise. In fact, he was 23 years old at the time but was cast as a high school student, making him one of the oldest actors to ever play a teenager in a major Hollywood film. The age gap was obvious, and some fans still joke about how Sean looked more like a substitute teacher than a high school student, and then there was the matter of getting actual professional drifters involved in the film. Drifting had been a well-known racing style in Japan for years, but it was still relatively unknown in mainstream Western pop culture when the film was in production. To make the driving sequences look authentic, the filmmakers brought in some of the best drift racers in the world, including Keiichi Tsuchiya, the Drift King himself. Tsuchiya, a Japanese racing legend, served as a stunt driver and consultant for the film. He even makes a cameo during one of the early drift scenes, shaking his head disapprovingly as Sean crashes his car, a subtle nod to how difficult the technique really is. But even with the best drivers in the world working behind the scenes, there was one major problem. Most of the actors couldn't drift. The solution? They had to learn. Lucas Black and other cast members underwent intense drift training, working with professional drivers to understand how to control a car mid-slide without spinning out. While Black eventually picked up some of the basics, it was Kang Han who impressed the stunt team the most. Kang became so comfortable behind the wheel that he continued practicing drifting long after production ended, and to this day, he remains one of the few Fast and Furious cast members with legitimate driving skills. Speaking of Kang, his character, Han Lu, wasn't originally meant to be part of the larger Fast and Furious universe. When Tokyo Drift was in development, Han was introduced as a new character with no ties to the previous films. But something about Kang's performance resonated with fans, and it didn't take long for Vin Diesel and the franchise's producers to realize that Han was too good to let go. This led to one of the most unusual retcons in movie history. Rather than leave Han's fate sealed in Tokyo Drift, the franchise decided to shift the timeline, making Tokyo Drift take place after the events of Fast and Furious 6. This allowed Han to return in multiple prequel films, fleshing out his backstory and turning him into one of the most beloved characters in the entire series. But Han wasn't the only unexpected character addition. Speaking of Kang, his character, Han Lu, wasn't originally meant to be part of the larger Fast and Furious universe. When Tokyo Drift was in development, Han was introduced as a new character with no ties to the previous films. But something about Kang's performance resonated with fans, and it didn't take long for Vin Diesel and the franchise's producers to realize that Han was too good to let go. This led to one of the most unusual retcons in movie history. Rather than leave Han's fate sealed in Tokyo Drift, the franchise decided to shift the timeline, making Tokyo Drift take place after the events of Fast and Furious 6. This allowed Han to return in multiple prequel films, fleshing out his backstory and turning him into one of the most beloved characters in the entire series. But Han wasn't the only unexpected character addition. Vin Diesel's surprise cameo at the end of the film was never part of the original script. In fact, Diesel wasn't supposed to be in Tokyo Drift at all. It wasn't until the film was nearly complete that the producers realized they needed a way to tie it back to the main franchise. Diesel was brought in at the last minute for a last-second cameo, setting up a connection that would later change the entire direction of the Fast saga. However, Diesel didn't agree to appear in the film for money. Instead, he negotiated something very different: the rights to his passion project, Riddick. Universal, eager to keep Diesel involved in the Fast franchise, traded his cameo appearance in Tokyo Drift for the film rights to the Riddick series, allowing him to continue working on that franchise on his own terms. But behind all the high-speed action and unexpected connections, Tokyo Drift also had its fair share of technical challenges. One of the most complex scenes to shoot was the famous drifting sequence through Shibuya Crossing, one of the busiest intersections in the world. Shutting down the location was impossible, so instead, the filmmakers recreated parts of the intersection on a closed set, blending real footage with carefully crafted visual effects. And let's not forget about the iconic parking garage drift scene, where Sean repeatedly fails to make it through the tight turns. That sequence wasn't just movie magic. Those crashes were very real. The stunt drivers had to intentionally crash cars over and over again to get the shots just right, and by the end of filming, several cars had been completely totaled. Despite all the risks, challenges, and unconventional filmmaking methods, The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift became something more than just a movie about cars. It introduced an entire generation to the art of drifting, reshaped the Fast and Furious franchise, and proved that sometimes the strangest, most unexpected choices lead to the biggest successes. Looking back, it's incredible to think that a film that wasn't originally meant to connect to the main saga, that had an entirely new cast, and that nearly had its production shut down multiple times, ended up becoming one of the most influential entries in the franchise. And perhaps that's the most fitting part of all. Just like Sean Boswell himself, Tokyo Drift was the underdog. It wasn't supposed to win. It wasn't supposed to leave a legacy. But somehow, against all odds, it did. And years later, the echoes of its impact can still be felt, every time an engine roars, tires squeal, and a car slides around a tight corner, defying gravity with the perfect drift. The story of The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, is one of speed, rebellion, and finding one's place in a world that doesn't welcome outsiders. But beneath the roaring engines and neon-lit streets, the film carries deeper thematic weight than it often gets credit for. While some view it as a standalone entry in the Fast and Furious saga, others recognize it as a turning point for the franchise, a movie that, despite its differences, left an undeniable mark on the larger narrative. Through its key events, character arcs, and stylistic choices, Tokyo Drift became more than just another car movie. It became a story about identity, redemption, and the cost of living fast. Thematic depth beneath the drifting. At its core, Tokyo Drift is a story about belonging. Every character in the film is searching for something: respect, identity, purpose. Sean Boswell is an outcast, forced to move from place to place, never truly fitting in anywhere. He's reckless, stubborn, and always on the outside looking in. His journey isn't just about learning how to drift. It's about learning how to adapt, how to survive in an unfamiliar world where skill, not brute force, determines status. This theme of outsiders finding their way is reinforced by Neal, who, despite growing up in Tokyo, is just as much of a drifter as Sean. She exists between two worlds, trapped between loyalty to DK and a desire for freedom. In many ways, she's a reflection of what Sean might become if he doesn't learn to stand on his own terms. Someone who lets their surroundings define them rather than carving their own path. Then there's Han, the film's philosophical center. He isn't just a mentor. He's a man who has been in Sean's position before, someone who understands what it means to live life at full speed while always looking over your shoulder. Han plays the long game, constantly seeking balance between risk and reward. But his calm demeanor hides something deeper, a man who knows that, eventually, the past will catch up to him. His presence in the film elevates the story beyond just cars and races. It adds weight, a sense that this world isn't just about winning, but about survival. Key events that define the film. Several major moments in Tokyo Drift define its impact and contribute to its lasting legacy. Each one serves as a turning point in Sean's journey and in the broader Fast and Furious universe. Sean's first race in Tokyo, a humbling defeat. One of the most crucial scenes in the film comes early, when Sean first challenges DK to a race. Up until this moment, Sean has always relied on raw power and sheer determination to win races. But Tokyo is different. Here, speed isn't the only factor. Precision, technique, and control matter just as much. As the race begins, Sean quickly realizes that he's completely out of his depth. Every turn is a disaster, his wheels skidding out, his car slamming into barriers while DK glides effortlessly through the course. By the time Sean crosses the finish line, his car is destroyed, his pride shattered, and his place in the Tokyo racing scene established. He's not ready. This moment is essential for his growth. Unlike other Fast and Furious protagonists who dominate from the start, Sean is forced to earn his place. His loss is not just a setback, it's the catalyst that sets the rest of the film in motion. It teaches him the importance of learning, of respect, and of patience. It's also a stark reminder that, in this world, failure has consequences. Han's philosophy and the meaning of control. Han's lessons to Sean are some of the most philosophical moments in the entire franchise. Unlike previous mentors in the series, Han doesn't just teach Sean how to win, he teaches him how to live. One of the most powerful exchanges comes when Han tells Sean, "Life's simple. You make choices and you don't look back." It's a statement that defines Han's entire existence. He's a man constantly on the move, living in the moment, never dwelling on the past. But there's an irony to his words, because deep down, Han does have a past, one that eventually catches up to him. His calm, almost zen-like demeanor masks the reality that he has made enemies, taken risks, and lived knowing that one day, it might all catch up to him. For Sean, this lesson is crucial. He must learn that racing, like life, isn't just about going faster, it's about control. In Tokyo, losing control means more than just losing a race. It can mean losing everything. Han's death, the moment that changed everything. If there's one scene that defines the emotional impact of Tokyo Drift, it's Han's death. Up until this moment, the film has been fast-paced, filled with high-energy races and a sense of rebellious excitement. But when Han's car is struck, flips, and explodes in flames, the entire tone of the film shifts. For Sean, Han wasn't just a mentor. He was the only person in Tokyo who truly believed in him. Losing him isn't just tragic, it's a wake-up call. The stakes are no longer about drifting or proving himself. This is about debt, power, revenge. Han's death also changed the entire Fast and Furious franchise. At the time, it was simply the end of his story. But when the later films retconned the timeline, revealing that Han had actually been killed by Deckard Shaw, his death suddenly became one of the most important moments in the entire saga. The final race, redemption through drift. The climax of the film, the mountain drift race between Sean and DK, feels like the perfect conclusion to everything Sean has learned. This isn't just a street race. It's a battle for control, for respect, and for closure. Unlike his first race against DK, Sean isn't just driving recklessly. He's using everything Han taught him. Every drift is calculated, every turn precise. He no longer relies on brute speed. He understands that racing is about balance, about adaptation, about knowing when to push and when to let go. As DK's desperation takes over, he makes a mistake. He loses control, his car tumbling off the road in a crash that signals the end of his reign. Sean, for the first time in his life, isn't running away from trouble. He's facing it head-on, proving that he belongs. The race's setting, a secluded, winding mountain pass, also plays into the film's philosophical themes. Unlike the crowded city streets, the mountain is silent, almost meditative. It's a space where skill alone determines the winner, where reputation means nothing, and where a driver is truly tested. Winning here is about more than speed, it's about mastery. And in that moment, Sean becomes Tokyo's new drift king. The film's impact and reception. Despite its initial lukewarm reception, Tokyo Drift has since become a cult classic, often praised for its commitment to authenticity in racing, its breathtaking drift sequences, and its underdog story that feels personal and grounded. Critics initially saw it as a detour from the main Fast and Furious storyline, with many questioning whether the franchise could continue without its original stars. But over time, the film's importance has only grown. It introduced audiences to Han, one of the most beloved characters in the series, brought Justin Lin into the director's chair, and redefined what the franchise could be. Final thoughts. In the end, The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift isn't just about racing, it's about finding identity, about knowing when to let go and when to fight. Every event, every loss, every drift in the film is part of a larger journey, not just for Sean, but for the franchise itself. What began as an experiment in style and setting became one of the most pivotal chapters in Fast and Furious history. And just like the perfect drift, it was all about timing, control, and knowing exactly when to take the turn. The streets of Tokyo came alive in The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, but what unfolded behind the scenes was just as thrilling as the races tearing through the neon-lit city. This wasn't just another sequel, it was an experiment, a bold reinvention of a franchise that had already gained a strong following. And in many ways, it was a risk. A new location, a new cast, and a completely different style of racing meant that the filmmakers were stepping into uncharted territory. From real-life illegal street races to last-minute casting decisions and unexpected studio deals, Tokyo Drift became a film where everything, both on and off-screen, was built on speed, improvisation, and a whole lot of luck. The search for authenticity, bringing drifting to Hollywood. By the mid-2000s, the Fast and Furious franchise was at a crossroads. The first two films had cemented street racing as a central theme, but director Justin Lin, who was brought on board for Tokyo Drift, wanted to push the boundaries. Rather than repeating the muscle car drag races of the earlier films, Lin and his team set their sights on something new, stylish, and culturally unique. Drifting, a technique that involves deliberately oversteering while maintaining control through a turn, was a huge part of Japan's underground racing culture. But there was one problem. Hollywood had no idea how to film it. The drifting technique required a completely different approach to stunt driving, and rather than relying solely on CGI, Lin insisted on using real cars, real drivers, and real drifting. This meant that the film's stunt team had to recruit some of the best drifters in the world, including Keiichi Tsuchiya, the legendary Drift King himself. Tsuchiya, a professional racer who had pioneered the sport in Japan, was brought on as a stunt driver and consultant. He made sure that every drift, every tire squeal, and every controlled slide looked authentic. In fact, in one scene, he makes a quick cameo, shaking his head in disapproval as Sean crashes his car, a playful nod to how difficult the technique really is. But training the actors to drift? That was a different story. Lucas Black, who played Sean, had no experience with drifting, so he was put through intensive training with professional drivers. The goal wasn't just to make the driving look real, it was to make sure Black could actually drift, at least at a basic level, during close-up shots. Despite his efforts, many of his drifting scenes still had to be performed by professionals, who flawlessly executed the film's most dangerous stunts. And speaking of stunts, illegal street racing and secret filming. One of the biggest challenges of filming Tokyo Drift was shooting in the actual streets of Tokyo. Unlike Los Angeles, where previous films had more flexibility, Tokyo had strict regulations that made large-scale car chases nearly impossible to film legally. The filmmakers quickly realized that getting permits for certain locations was out of the question. The solution? They shot the scenes anyway. That's right, many of the film's racing sequences were shot without official permission. The production team used hidden cameras, quick setups, and rapid getaways to capture real footage before authorities could shut them down. One of the most complicated scenes to film was the Shibuya crossing sequence, where Sean and Han weave through one of the busiest intersections in the world. Closing it down was impossible, so instead, they had to use a mix of real footage and a carefully built replica set to make the scene work. And then there was the famous parking garage drift sequence, the scene where Sean repeatedly fails to make it through the tight turns. That wasn't just acting, those crashes were real. The stunt drivers had to intentionally crash dozens of cars to get the shots just right, with each failed drift adding to the film's raw, unscripted feel. Casting twists and unexpected cameos. Unlike the first two Fast and Furious films, Tokyo Drift introduced an entirely new cast. There was no Paul Walker, no Vin Diesel, just fresh faces in a new location. But finding the right lead proved to be a challenge. Lucas Black, known for his work in Friday Night Lights, was ultimately cast as Sean Boswell. While his southern drawl and rugged look set him apart from previous protagonists, one hilarious fact about his casting was that Black was 23 years old, playing a high school student. In fact, several actors in the movie were well into their 20s, making Sean's teenage look one of the most debated aspects of the film. Then, of course, there was Han Lu, played by Kang. Originally, Han wasn't meant to be a major character in the Fast saga. He was simply a supporting mentor figure in Tokyo Drift. But Kang's effortlessly cool performance made Han an instant fan favorite, which led to one of the biggest timeline shifts in movie history. Instead of leaving Han's story as it was, future Fast and Furious films retconned the timeline to bring him back, making Tokyo Drift take place after Fast and Furious 6, a decision that completely reshaped the franchise. And then, there was Vin Diesel's last-minute cameo. At the time, Diesel wasn't involved in Tokyo Drift, but Universal desperately wanted to connect the film to the larger franchise. Diesel agreed to appear in the final scene, but rather than taking a paycheck, he made a surprising demand: the rights to his passion project, Riddick. Universal agreed, and in return, Diesel made his brief but game-changing appearance in Tokyo Drift, cementing its place in the Fast and Furious timeline. A franchise that almost didn't survive. Despite the effort put into making Tokyo Drift, its success was far from guaranteed. The film, which had a $85 million budget, was a huge departure from the previous entries, and many fans were skeptical about the lack of familiar faces. Box office numbers were modest compared to later Fast films, with Tokyo Drift earning $159 million worldwide, making it one of the lower-grossing entries in the franchise. But over time, Tokyo Drift became a cult classic. Fans embraced its authentic portrayal of Japanese street racing culture, its stylish drifting sequences, and, of course, Han's unforgettable presence. In many ways, the film's underdog status mirrored Sean's own story. It didn't start as a winner, but over time, it earned its place. Final thoughts. A movie built on speed and risk. The Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift is unlike any other entry in the franchise. It took risks that few Hollywood films would dare to take. Filming without permits, introducing an entirely new cast, relying on real-life drifting legends, and even reshaping the franchise timeline just to bring back one character. And yet, despite all the challenges, Tokyo Drift has stood the test of time. It proved that the Fast saga was bigger than just one character, one city, or one type of racing. It introduced drifting to the mainstream, it gave us one of the most beloved characters in Fast and Furious history, and it set the stage for the global phenomenon that the franchise would become. It may not have been the biggest box office hit. It may not have had the star power of later films. But Tokyo Drift had heart, style, and the raw energy of a franchise that was just getting started. And in the world of Fast and Furious, that's all that really matters. The neon lights flicker as the hum of engines fills the air. Streets shine with the reflection of artificial glow, and in the distance, a faint mist of tire smoke lingers in the night. This is Tokyo, a city that never stops moving, never stops breathing, and never stops racing. The setting of the Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift is more than just a backdrop. It's a character of its own, pulsing with energy, danger, and a deep-rooted racing culture that shapes every turn in the film. From the tight, winding mountain roads to the chaos of the city's busiest intersections, every location tells its own story. And with the help of stylized cinematography, dynamic framing, and electrifying lighting, Tokyo becomes the perfect battleground for a film that is as much about identity as it is about speed. The first time Sean Boswell steps foot in Tokyo, it's clear, he's an outsider in every possible way. He doesn't understand the language, the culture, or the unspoken rules that govern the streets. The film's cinematography captures this sense of alienation immediately, using wide, expansive shots that emphasize how small he looks against the towering skyscrapers, the endless neon lights, the sea of people moving in a rhythm he can't yet follow. The camera lingers on his confusion, his uncertainty, framing him as just another lost figure swallowed by the city's fast-paced movement. But Tokyo isn't just about being overwhelming, it's about being alive. The film's color palette leans heavily into cool neon tones, splashes of blue, pink, and purple illuminating the wet pavement. These colors don't just create a visually stunning atmosphere, they help set the tone of the film, making every scene feel slick, modern, and kinetic. The way the light reflects off the cars, the way shadows stretch long through the alleyways, it all reinforces the feeling that Tokyo is both inviting and dangerous, a place of opportunity and consequence. The urban jungle, racing through Tokyo's streets. The heart of Tokyo Drift lies in its unique take on street racing, and Tokyo's streets provide the perfect stage for this evolution. Unlike the wide highways and open roads of previous fast films, the races in Tokyo Drift are defined by tight, confined spaces, places where every move has to be precise, where every mistake is amplified by the lack of room to recover. One of the first true glimpses of this comes in the film's legendary parking garage scene. When Sean first tries to drift, the camera work shifts dramatically. Tight framing, quick cuts, and low angles emphasize just how difficult this technique is. The closed-in environment of the parking structure makes his failures feel even more claustrophobic, as his car slams into barriers over and over again. The cinematography places the viewer inside the chaos, making it impossible to ignore the difference between a driver who understands drifting and one who doesn't. But the most breathtaking use of Tokyo's city streets comes later, the famous Shibuya crossing scene. In a moment that perfectly captures the film's high-stakes energy, Sean and Han weave through one of the busiest pedestrian crossings in the world, dodging both cars and people in a heart-pounding display of skill. The decision to use real locations, rather than relying entirely on closed sets, heightens the realism, making every near-miss feel as dangerous as it looks. The mountain roads, the ultimate test. One of the first true glimpses of this comes in the film's legendary parking garage scene. When Sean first tries to drift, the camera work shifts dramatically. Tight framing, quick cuts, and low angles emphasize just how difficult this technique is. The closed-in environment of the parking structure makes his failures feel even more claustrophobic, as his car slams into barriers over and over again. The cinematography places the viewer inside the chaos, making it impossible to ignore the difference between a driver who understands drifting and one who doesn't. But the most breathtaking use of Tokyo's city streets comes later, the famous Shibuya crossing scene. In a moment that perfectly captures the film's high-stakes energy, Sean and Han weave through one of the busiest pedestrian crossings in the world, dodging both cars and people in a heart-pounding display of skill. The decision to use real locations, rather than relying entirely on closed sets, heightens the realism, making every near-miss feel as dangerous as it looks. The mountain roads, the ultimate test. While Tokyo's urban environment plays a huge role in defining the film's unique style, it's the mountain drift race that solidifies Tokyo Drift as something special. Up until this point, we've seen fast cars, bright lights, and the energy of the city, but now we are transported into the raw, natural danger of Japan's mountain passes. This setting, inspired by real-life Tuge, mountain pass, racing culture, isn't just visually striking, it's symbolic. The city was where Sean learned, but the mountains are where he must prove himself. The cinematography widens here, allowing us to take in the sheer scale of the challenge ahead. The way the camera follows the cars through these treacherous curves, shifting seamlessly between high-speed tracking shots and aerial views, gives the race an almost dreamlike intensity. The darkness of the mountain road is broken only by the headlights slicing through the mist, the brief glow of brake lights illuminating the path ahead. This contrast between light and darkness, control and chaos, reflects Sean's final transformation from reckless outsider to a driver in control of his own fate. cinematography and motion, the language of speed. One of the most innovative aspects of Tokyo Drift is the way it captures the art of drifting itself. Unlike traditional racing sequences, where the focus is often on straight-line speed and high-speed chases, this film needed to make the act of drifting feel fluid, almost like a dance. To achieve this, the cinematographers used a mix of tracking shots, in-car cameras, and dramatic slow-motion sequences. The camera doesn't just capture the cars from the outside, it moves with them, following the motion of the drift in a way that feels completely immersive. One particularly impressive technique used in the film is the drift cam, a specialized camera rig that mimicked the movement of the cars, allowing for shots that felt like they were sliding in sync with the action. This gave the racing sequences a more natural, organic feel, making every drift, every turn, and every near collision feel immediate and real. Another unique choice was the use of slow motion not for speed, but for precision. In key moments, like when Sean finally perfects his drifting technique, the film slows down just slightly, letting the audience take in every tiny adjustment, every calculated movement. It's not just about power, it's about technique, control, and mastery. Sound design, the roar of the streets. While the visuals define the aesthetic of Tokyo Drift, the sound design plays just as important a role in immersing the audience into the world of underground drifting. Unlike traditional street racing films that rely solely on roaring engines and screeching tires, Tokyo Drift incorporates the sounds of the city itself. The background is alive with distant car horns, the chatter of Tokyo nightlife, the hum of neon signs, creating an environment that feels as fast and unpredictable as the races themselves. The sound of the cars is also distinct. Since drifting is about control and finesse, the screech of tires on asphalt is exaggerated, allowing the audience to feel the tension in every turn. The way the sound mix shifts dynamically, sometimes muting everything except for the car engines, other times letting the city's sounds blend into the action, helps keep every race feeling fresh and different. A setting that feels alive. What makes Tokyo such a perfect setting for this story isn't just its visual appeal, it's the fact that it feels like a living, breathing entity. The streets, the crowds, the tight alleyways, the high-tech skyline, everything is constantly in motion, just like the drivers navigating through it. Tokyo isn't just a backdrop. It's a challenge. It's a place that doesn't wait for you to catch up. It forces you to adapt or get left behind. And for Sean, adapting is the only way to survive. The setting mirrors his growth, from his struggles with the fast-moving, unfamiliar world to his eventual mastery of it. Final thoughts: a city that defines the film. From the moment Sean first steps onto the neon-lit streets to the final drift down the mountain, Tokyo's setting and cinematography define every moment of the film. The way the camera moves, the way light is used, the way sound immerses us in the racing culture. All of it comes together to create something visually striking, emotionally impactful, and completely unique. More than just another Fast and Furious movie, Tokyo Drift stands out because of how deeply it embraces its setting. It's a story that couldn't be told anywhere else. It's Tokyo's pulse, Tokyo's rhythm, and Tokyo's streets that make every drift, every turn, and every moment feel like pure cinematic adrenaline. The streets of Tokyo, the art of drifting, and a brand new cast stepping into one of Hollywood's most high-octane franchises, The Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift was always destined to be a film unlike any other in the series. But what happened behind the cameras was just as thrilling as what ended up on screen. The making of Tokyo Drift was a wild ride, full of unexpected twists, guerrilla filmmaking tactics, last-minute casting surprises, and a production team that had to improvise their way through the unpredictable chaos of filming in one of the busiest cities in the world. From the camaraderie between the cast to the sheer madness of capturing some of the most breathtaking racing sequences in Fast and Furious history. The behind-the-scenes journey of this film was one of risk, innovation, and a whole lot of burnt rubber. A director thrown into the deep end. When Justin Lin was brought in to direct Tokyo Drift, he was stepping into completely unfamiliar territory. At the time, Lin was known for his work on indie films, and while he had talent, he had never helmed a major Hollywood blockbuster before. So, when Universal handed him the keys to a Fast and Furious movie, he knew he had one shot to make it count. His first challenge? Convincing the studio that a film about drifting, something barely known in mainstream Western culture, could be the next evolution of the franchise. Lin was determined to bring real racing culture to the forefront, ensuring that every drift, every stunt, and every moment on screen felt authentic. But to do that, he would need the best drivers in the world. The drifters who became legends. Unlike traditional Hollywood action movies that rely heavily on CGI for vehicle stunts, Tokyo Drift set out to do something radically different. Everything had to be done for real. Tsuchiya wasn't just a consultant. He was one of the drivers, making sure that every drift was flawless, technically sound, and visually impressive. And in a fun nod to his legacy, he even appears in the film. In the infamous scene where Sean fails miserably at drifting in the parking garage, Tsuchiya plays the bystander who shakes his head in disappointment, a subtle inside joke for racing fans. But while the professional drifters could handle the high-speed precision, there was one major problem. The cast couldn't. Teaching Lucas Black to drift and crash. Lucas Black, cast as Sean Boswell, had zero experience with drifting or high-performance driving when he was brought onto the film. And since Justin Lin was committed to using as much practical stunt work as possible, Black was thrown into an intensive drift training program. Under the guidance of professional racers, he learned how to control a car mid-slide, how to maintain balance through sharp turns, and how to avoid spinning out. The learning curve was steep, and while Black improved significantly over time, there were many, many crashes along the way. In fact, the infamous parking garage scene, where Sean keeps slamming into barriers, was partially real. Some of those mistakes weren't scripted. The filmmakers decided to keep Black's genuine struggles in the final cut, making Sean's frustration feel even more authentic. But out of everyone in the cast, it was Sung Kang Han who impressed the stunt team the most. While Black struggled with drifting, Kang picked it up quickly, practicing long after filming wrapped. To this day, he remains one of the few actors in the franchise with actual drifting skills. Filming in Tokyo, a production nightmare. While Tokyo Drift is famous for its stunning night sequences through the real streets of Tokyo, what many fans don't know is just how difficult it was to film in the city. Unlike Los Angeles, where permits can be secured for major street closures, Tokyo operates under strict restrictions when it comes to filming in public areas. The biggest issue? Shibuya Crossing, the busiest pedestrian intersection in the world. Justin Lin desperately wanted a drifting scene right in the heart of Shibuya, but securing a permit was impossible. The police wouldn't allow any kind of street racing to be filmed there, especially at night when the area is at its most visually dynamic. So the filmmakers did what any desperate crew would do. They shot the scene illegally. Using hidden cameras, remote-controlled rigs, and an ultra-fast filming approach, the team set up their shots, filmed as quickly as possible, and cleared out before authorities could stop them. According to Lin, they only got a few takes before the police forced them to leave. Vin Diesel's surprise cameo, a last-minute deal. For the majority of Tokyo Drift, it seemed completely disconnected from the larger Fast and Furious franchise. There was no Paul Walker, no Vin Diesel, no connection to Dom's crew in L.A. But that all changed in the film's final moments. The legendary last-minute appearance of Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel, at the end of Tokyo Drift was never originally planned. The film was meant to stand alone, with an entirely new cast and no ties to the previous movies. But then, Universal got cold feet. They worried that audiences would feel too disconnected from the franchise, so they called Diesel in for a last-minute cameo. But Diesel didn't want money for his role. Instead, he negotiated a deal. Universal would give him the rights to the Riddick franchise in exchange for his Tokyo Drift cameo. The studio agreed. Diesel made his now iconic appearance, and Tokyo Drift was suddenly linked to the larger Fast and Furious universe. Han's death, a scene that changed the franchise forever. At the time of filming, Han's death was meant to be final. It was a tragic but necessary moment. His demise cemented the danger of Tokyo's underground world, and it gave Sean the motivation he needed to step up and face DK. But Sung Kang's magnetic performance as Han changed everything. Audiences loved him. They loved his laid-back confidence, his effortless charm, his philosophical outlook on life. And Universal saw an opportunity. Rather than leaving Han's fate as it was, they made a radical decision: to rearrange the entire Fast and Furious timeline so that Han could return. This meant that Tokyo Drift would later be placed asterisk after the events of Fast and Furious 6, making it one of the most unique franchise timeline shifts in Hollywood history. Final thoughts: a film that was never supposed to work. At the time of its release, Tokyo Drift was seen as a gamble, a film that had no returning stars until the last scene, a brand new racing style, and an entirely new setting. But looking back, it's clear that Tokyo Drift was far more important than anyone realized at the time. It gave the franchise a fresh start, introduced one of its most beloved characters, and ultimately set the stage for the entire Fast and Furious saga moving forward. The behind-the-scenes madness, the illegal filming, the secret deals, the last-minute changes, all of it adds to the legend of Tokyo Drift. Because just like Sean Boswell learning how to drift, this movie had no choice but to adapt, to push forward, to carve out its own place in the world. And against all odds, it did. The streets of Tokyo are more than just a playground for high-speed drifts and underground races. They are a battleground for identity, respect, and transformation. The Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift is not just about fast cars and sharp turns. It is a story about outsiders finding their place, about redemption through mastery, and about understanding that control is more powerful than speed. Beneath the roaring engines and neon lights, the film is layered with themes and symbolism that define its deeper meaning, shaping the characters' journeys as much as the asphalt beneath their tires. From the very first frame, Sean Boswell is positioned as a drifter in every sense of the word. He doesn't belong in Arizona, where he's constantly in trouble. He doesn't belong in his mother's world, where she sees him as a burden. And when he arrives in Tokyo, he is even more of an outsider, lost in a culture he doesn't understand, a language he doesn't speak, and a racing style that makes him feel like a beginner all over again. His journey isn't just about winning races. It's about finding where he belongs, understanding the value of patience, and learning that true respect isn't taken, it's earned. The art of drifting, a metaphor for control and growth. The very concept of drifting serves as a powerful metaphor throughout the film. Unlike traditional racing, where the fastest car wins, drifting is about control, balance, and adapting to every twist and turn. It's about letting go of brute force and learning how to move with the road rather than against it. For Sean, who has always relied on reckless speed and brute acceleration, drifting represents a completely different way of thinking. His first attempt at it, an embarrassing, out-of-control disaster, symbolizes the fact that he still sees the world in black and white. Go fast or don't race at all. But drifting requires him to be patient, to respect the track, to master his emotions rather than let them drive him forward blindly. This shift in mindset mirrors his personal growth. In the beginning, Sean is someone who rushes into every decision without thinking of the consequences. He races in Arizona without considering what will happen if he loses. He provokes DK without realizing the danger he's putting himself in. He steps into Tokyo's underground world without understanding the hierarchy, the risks, or the cost of failure. But as Han teaches him, drifting isn't about being the fastest. It's about knowing when to push forward and when to let go. By the time Sean races DK on the mountain, he has fully embraced this philosophy. He doesn't just win with speed. He wins with skill, precision, and patience. The mountain, a test of mastery and redemption. Throughout the film, racing in Tokyo's tight, neon-lit streets represents chaos and unpredictability. The city is fast-paced, crowded, and unforgiving, just like Sean's reckless nature. But by the final act, the setting shifts to something entirely different. The mountain. The mountain roads of Japan are not just an exciting new race location. They are a symbol of challenge, tradition, and the ultimate test of a driver's ability. In real-life Japanese racing culture, mountain drifting, tuge racing, is the highest level of skill a driver can achieve. The track is narrow, the curves are unforgiving, and one wrong move can send a car plummeting off a cliff. For Sean, This race isn't just about beating DK, it's about proving that he has learned to control himself, to adapt, to be worthy of respect. The race takes place in complete darkness, the only lights coming from the cars themselves, piercing through the night like lone warriors in battle. The symbolism here is powerful. Sean is no longer relying on the distractions of the city. He has entered a place where skill alone determines who survives and who falls. By winning, Sean cements his growth, not just as a racer, but as a person who understands the true meaning of control. The mountain becomes a rite of passage, a final test where Sean earns his place in the world, not by force, but by skill and patience. Han's philosophy, the meaning of freedom. If Sean's journey is about learning how to belong, Han's journey is about learning how to let go. Han is one of the most enigmatic, philosophical characters in the entire Fast and Furious saga. Unlike DK, who thrives on dominance and fear, Han carries himself with effortless calm and confidence. He isn't fighting to prove himself because he already knows who he is. One of Han's most memorable quotes in the film is, "Life's simple. You make choices and you don't look back." This line isn't just a catchy saying, it's his entire worldview. Han lives in the present, never looking over his shoulder, never regretting the choices he makes. But the tragic irony of his character is that his past eventually catches up to him. His death isn't just a plot twist, it's a message about the cost of living fast. No matter how much Han preaches about moving forward, about never looking back, the past still finds a way to collide with him at full speed. In a film where drifting is the key to survival, Han's death is the one moment where someone doesn't have control. It's sudden, violent, and final. And for Sean, it's a reminder that racing is more than just a game. It's life, death, consequence. Decay and the fall of an empire. If Han represents freedom, then Takashi, DK, Drift King, represents control through fear. DK isn't just the best drifter in Tokyo. He is the product of a system built on legacy and intimidation. His title, his reputation, even his power all come from his uncle's ties to the Yakuza. Unlike Sean, who must fight for respect, DK was born into it. This is why Sean's rise threatens him so deeply. It's not just about racing, it's about the fact that Sean represents everything DK doesn't understand. Sean is reckless but determined. He is an outsider but refuses to back down. And most importantly, he doesn't fear DK the way others do. The mountain race isn't just about who is the better driver, it's about who truly deserves their place at the top. By the time DK's car careens off the edge, it's clear, he was never the true Drift King. He was just holding on to borrowed power, and now that power is gone. Sean's evolution, from reckless outsider to Drift King. At the beginning of the film, Sean is impulsive, brash, and constantly running away from his problems. But by the end, he isn't running anymore. He has found his home, his purpose, and his identity. The final scene, where he is challenged to a new race, this time by Dominic Toretto himself, is symbolic. It's a passing of the torch, an acknowledgement that Sean has earned his place among the best. In many ways, Sean's journey mirrors the journey of the film itself. Tokyo Drift was once seen as the forgotten chapter of the Fast saga, the odd one out, the outsider. But over time, it has earned its place, proving that it was never just a side story. It was the film that redefined the franchise. Final thoughts, a story about more than speed. Beneath the high-speed chases and thrilling drifts, Tokyo Drift is a film about learning when to push forward and when to let go, about understanding that control isn't about forcing things, it's about balance. Sean arrives in Tokyo as a drifter without direction, and by the end, he has found his place, his purpose, and his respect. The film's themes of control, redemption, and identity resonate far beyond the streets of Tokyo, making it not just a racing movie, but a story about what it means to truly belong, the thrill of drifting, the neon-soaked streets of Tokyo, and the electrifying tension of underground racing, the Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift isn't just a film about speed, it's a film about style, precision, and cinematic craftsmanship. From the way the camera moves with the cars to the seamless blend of practical stunts and visual effects, everything about Tokyo Drift was designed to make the audience feel every turn, every drift, and every pulse-pounding moment. But the magic of the film isn't just in what we see, it's in how we experience it. Capturing the art of drifting, a cinematic challenge. From the very beginning, Tokyo Drift set out to do something that no other Hollywood film had done before: bring real drifting culture to the big screen in a way that felt authentic. Unlike previous entries in the franchise, which focused on straight-line drag racing and high-speed chases, this film needed to make drifting the centerpiece. That meant completely rethinking how to shoot racing sequences. Director Justin Lin, known for his fast-paced, kinetic visual style, knew that traditional car chase filming techniques wouldn't work here. Drifting is an art form, and it needed to be filmed differently. Not as reckless chaos, but as controlled, calculated movement. One of the biggest filmmaking innovations used in Tokyo Drift was the drift cam, a specialized camera rig designed to move with the cars, mimicking their drift motion in a way that made the audience feel inside the action. Unlike standard tracking shots, which simply follow a moving vehicle, the drift cam was engineered to capture the exact angle of a car mid-drift, creating a sensation that the viewer was riding alongside the driver. Another breakthrough technique was the use of longer tracking shots during drift sequences, allowing the audience to fully appreciate the skill involved in each maneuver. One of the biggest filmmaking innovations used in Tokyo Drift was the drift cam, a specialized camera rig designed to move with the cars, mimicking their drift motion in a way that made the audience feel inside the action. Unlike standard tracking shots, which simply follow a moving vehicle, the drift cam was engineered to capture the exact angle of a car mid-drift, creating a sensation that the viewer was riding alongside the driver. Another breakthrough technique was the use of longer tracking shots during drift sequences, allowing the audience to fully appreciate the skill involved in each maneuver. Rather than relying on quick cuts and shaky cam techniques, which were common in action films of the time, Lin opted for fluid, sweeping camera motions that emphasized precision over speed. This approach made every drift feel graceful, deliberate, and full of tension. Practical effects over CGI, keeping it real. One of the biggest misconceptions about Tokyo Drift is that many of its racing sequences were CGI-enhanced. In reality, almost all of the drifting scenes were performed by real professional drivers, filmed in real locations. The production team brought in some of the best drift racers in the world, including Keiichi Tsuchiya, the real-life Drift King, to execute complex stunts with absolute precision. This commitment to practical effects made a huge difference in how the film looked and felt. The weight of the cars, the movement of the tires on pavement, the subtle corrections made by the drivers mid-drift, all of it was real, raw, and visually stunning. But capturing these stunts wasn't easy. The team had to modify many of the cars to handle the extreme conditions of drifting on tight urban streets. Suspension tuning, weight distribution changes, and high-performance tires were custom-built for each vehicle, ensuring they could handle the rigorous demands of filming. And when it came to the now iconic mountain drift sequence, things got even more challenging. The narrow roads, the steep drop-offs, and the need for absolute precision meant that only the most skilled drivers could handle these stunts. To capture the tension, the film crew used drone cameras and high-speed tracking vehicles, making sure every drift was seen from the perfect angle. Sound design, the roar of the streets. Sound is one of the most underrated aspects of filmmaking, yet in a movie like Tokyo Drift, it is just as important as what we see. The way the engines rev, the tires screech, and the metal grinds against the pavement all add layers to the film's intensity. The sound design in Tokyo Drift was carefully crafted to immerse the audience into the world of drifting. Each car had its own unique sound profile, emphasizing the difference between raw power and finesse. Sean's early muscle car, for example, has a deep, guttural growl, representing his aggressive, uncontrolled driving style. DK's Nissan 350Z, on the other hand, has a smooth, high-pitched rev, reflecting the precision and calculated nature of his drifting technique. Han's Mazda RX-7 features a rotary engine's distinct whir, symbolizing his effortless, laid-back approach to driving. By carefully designing the way each car sounded, the filmmakers made sure that even without looking at the screen, audiences could tell who was driving just by the way their car roared or glided through the turns. And then, there's the absence of sound. In moments of high tension, particularly during the final mountain race, the sound mix lowers the background noise, isolating the revving engines and the whistling wind through the trees. This technique draws the audience into the moment, making them feel the danger, the stakes, and the sheer concentration required for Sean to win. Editing and pacing, making every race feel unique. One of the greatest challenges in making a racing film is ensuring that every action sequence feels fresh and exciting. A common mistake in car movies is overloading the audience with non-stop, fast-cut editing, making it difficult to actually appreciate what's happening on screen. Tokyo Drift avoids this by varying the pacing of its editing, making each race feel distinct. Sean's first race in Tokyo is edited with sharp, jarring cuts, emphasizing his lack of control. The audience experiences the chaos, the panic, and the overwhelming speed as Sean struggles to adapt. When Han drifts through Shibuya Crossing, the camera slows down slightly, giving the audience a moment to appreciate the elegance of his movements. It's a stark contrast to Sean's reckless style. The final mountain race is edited with longer takes, allowing us to feel the danger of every turn. Unlike Sean's earlier races, this sequence is smooth, patient, and focused, just like his new driving style. This approach keeps the film engaging from start to finish, ensuring that the audience isn't just watching the action, they're experiencing the evolution of Sean as a driver. Box office performance. An underdog story. Despite its groundbreaking visual style, technical achievements, and cultural impact, Tokyo Drift was not an instant success at the box office. The film had a budget of $85 million, a significant amount for a franchise still in transition. But upon release, it only managed to earn $159 million worldwide, making it one of the lowest-grossing entries in the Fast and Furious series. Critics were initially divided. Some praised the film's gritty realism, stunning visuals, and innovative action sequences, while others were unimpressed with the absence of familiar characters from the previous films. Many assumed that this would be the last Fast and Furious movie, an experiment that didn't quite take off. But over time, something incredible happened. Tokyo Drift gained a cult following, especially among car enthusiasts and drifting fans who appreciated its authentic portrayal of the underground racing scene. Its unique style, incredible cinematography, and introduction of Han, one of the most beloved characters in the series, made it a fan favorite. And when the Fast and Furious franchise reinvented itself in later films, bringing Han back and incorporating Tokyo Drift into the larger timeline, the film's reputation skyrocketed. Today, it is regarded as one of the most influential films in the series, setting the stage for the global success of later installments. Final thoughts. A film that changed the game. Looking back, Tokyo Drift was ahead of its time. Its use of practical effects, innovative cinematography, and immersive sound design made it a standout in the action genre. While it may not have been an immediate box office juggernaut, its impact on car culture, filmmaking techniques, and the evolution of the Fast and Furious franchise cannot be denied. It took risks. It drifted into uncharted territory. And just like the perfect drift, it found its place, balanced between chaos and control. The streets of Tokyo weren't just a setting for the Fast and the Furious. Tokyo Drift, they became the proving ground for a cast that would forever leave their mark on the Fast and Furious franchise. When the film was first announced, many fans were skeptical. There was no Vin Diesel, no Paul Walker, no familiar faces from the first two films. Instead, a completely new group of actors would take the spotlight, led by Lucas Black, Sung Kang, Bow Wow, Brian T., and Nathalie Kelley. But what started as a bold departure from the established formula quickly turned into one of the most beloved entries in the franchise, and much of that success was thanks to the performances of its cast. Over time, Tokyo Drift grew into a cult classic, and the actors who once felt like outsiders in the fast world became key figures in one of the biggest film franchises of all time. Lucas Black, the reluctant hero who found his place. When Lucas Black was cast as Sean Boswell, many were surprised by the decision. Unlike previous Fast and Furious protagonists, Black was not a Hollywood action star. He was known for his work in dramas like Friday Night Lights, and his strong Southern accent made him an unusual choice for the lead role in a film set in Tokyo. But that's exactly why director Justin Lin wanted him. Sean's entire character arc is about being an outsider, someone who doesn't fit in but has to prove himself in an unfamiliar world. In interviews, Black has spoken about the challenges of stepping into a major franchise with no established characters to rely on. He admitted that he was initially hesitant to take on the role, knowing that fans might not accept a Fast and Furious movie without its original stars. But once he immersed himself in the world of drifting, racing culture, and Japanese street life, he began to understand why the film was so special. One of the biggest challenges Black faced was learning how to drift for real. Unlike most actors who rely entirely on stunt doubles, Black was put through intense driving training so that he could perform at least some of his own drifting sequences. In interviews, he recalled how he crashed multiple times during the early training sessions, struggling to grasp the precision required to drift properly. "Drifting is nothing like regular racing," Black once said. "You're not just trying to go fast, you're trying to control chaos." And that's exactly what Sean has to do in the story. "It was frustrating, but once I got the hang of it, it was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had on a film." Despite initial skepticism from fans, Black's performance won many people over, particularly because of the way he evolved throughout the film. His portrayal of Sean was rough around the edges but undeniably real, and by the time Tokyo Drift ended, he had earned his place in the Fast and Furious legacy. Kang, the breakout star no one saw coming. If there is one actor who truly stole the show in Tokyo Drift, it was Kang as Han Lu. At the time, Kang was a relatively unknown actor, having worked on a handful of independent films. But from the moment he appeared on screen, Han became the heart and soul of the movie. Unlike previous characters in the Fast franchise, Han wasn't about flashy arrogance or brute force. He was calm, collected, and impossibly cool. He didn't need to prove himself, he already knew who he was. In interviews, Kang has talked about how he developed Han's unique demeanor. Rather than playing him like a typical action movie sidekick, Kang infused Han with a laid-back wisdom that made him feel like a seasoned veteran of the streets. He compared Han's philosophy to Bruce Lee's approach to martial arts, flowing like water, always adapting, never forcing things. One of Kang's most memorable moments on set came when he was learning how to drift. Unlike Black, who struggled with the technique, Kang picked it up surprisingly fast. In fact, his instructors were so impressed that they let him continue practicing even after the film had wrapped. But it wasn't just Han's driving skills that made him a fan favorite, it was his attitude. Han was more than just a racer. He was a mentor, a philosopher, someone who had already seen the worst the world had to offer and come out on the other side. What no one knew at the time was that Han's character would become so beloved that the franchise would bend time itself to bring him back. His tragic death in Tokyo Drift was meant to be final, but when audiences connected with him on such a deep level, the filmmakers decided to rewrite the Fast timeline, making Tokyo Drift take place after the events of Fast and Furious 6, allowing Han to appear in multiple movies. "I had no idea Han would become such a big deal," Kang later said in an interview. "I thought it was just a one-time thing. But people loved him so much that they found a way to bring him back. That's surreal." Bow Wow, bringing humor and hustle. Another surprising casting choice was Bow Wow as Twinkie, Sean's first friend in Tokyo. Unlike past comic relief characters in the franchise, Twinkie wasn't just there for jokes. He was the bridge between worlds, the guy who helped Sean navigate Tokyo's underground scene. In interviews, Bow Wow has talked about how much fun he had on set, especially when it came to improvising his dialogue. Much of Twinkie's humor wasn't scripted. It was Bow Wow playing off the energy of the other actors. "Twinkie was that dude who could talk his way into anything," Bow Wow said. "He wasn't the best driver, but he knew how to hustle. That's why he survives." One of the funniest moments behind the scenes involved Twinkie's Hulk-themed car. During one take, Bow Wow accidentally scratched the vehicle while trying to park it, and the crew had to quickly repaint the damage before filming continued. Brian T., the villain who owned every scene. No Fast and Furious film is complete without a strong antagonist, and Brian T. delivered a truly intimidating performance as Takashi, aka DK, Drift King. Unlike previous villains, who relied on brute strength or connections, DK was a different kind of threat. He wasn't just a gangster, he was a technically perfect racer, a master drifter who had earned his title. That made him a genuine challenge for Sean, who had to do more than just drive fast to beat him. In interviews, T has expressed how much he enjoyed playing the role, particularly because DK wasn't a typical villain. He was a guy fighting to keep his place in a world that was changing. DK wasn't evil, T explained. He was just desperate to hold on to his power. Sean threatened everything he had, so he lashed out. I loved playing that inner conflict. Audience reception. A film that became a cult classic. Upon its release, Tokyo Drift was met with mixed reviews. Many critics weren't sure what to make of it. Some praised its authentic portrayal of drifting culture, while others felt that it lacked the star power of the previous films. But over the years, something unexpected happened. The audience found the film. Car enthusiasts, racing fans, and longtime Fast and Furious followers began to revisit Tokyo Drift and appreciate its uniqueness. It wasn't just another sequel. It was a movie that introduced a whole new world, new rules, and new characters that fans would eventually love. Today, Tokyo Drift is regarded as one of the most important films in the franchise. It introduced Han, drifting culture, and the idea that the Fast saga could exist outside of its original characters. And just like Sean, it proved itself against all odds. The streets of Tokyo may have been the setting, but the Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift was more than just a race through neon-lit alleys and winding mountain roads. It was a film that redefined an entire franchise, introducing new characters, new racing styles, and a new way of looking at the world of underground street racing. It wasn't just about horsepower and speed, it was about technique, discipline, and knowing when to let go. Looking back, it's incredible to see how a movie that was once considered a detour from the main franchise became one of its most influential chapters. Tokyo Drift had no Paul Walker, no Vin Diesel, at least, not until the very end, and no clear connection to the first two films. And yet, what it brought to the table was something fresh, something bold, something that would shape the entire future of the Fast saga. From its stunning cinematography that captured the art of drifting with precision, to its realistic portrayal of Tokyo's underground racing culture, Tokyo Drift delivered an experience that was grounded yet visually spectacular. The commitment to practical effects over CGI, the use of professional drifters for authenticity, and the careful balance between action and character development all contributed to a film that stood out, not just within its franchise, but within the genre itself. And of course, we can't talk about Tokyo Drift without recognizing the characters that made it special. Lucas Black's portrayal of Sean Boswell took us on a journey of redemption and growth, proving that speed alone doesn't make a great racer, control does. Sung Kang's Han Lu became the soul of the film, a character so beloved that the franchise reworked its entire timeline just to bring him back. Brian T's DK was more than just a villain. He was a symbol of the old guard, fighting to maintain his dominance in a world that was shifting beneath him. And let's not forget the behind-the-scenes stories that made this film even more legendary. The guerrilla-style filming on the real streets of Tokyo, the police shutting down production, the cast learning how to drift from actual racing legends, and Vin Diesel's surprise cameo deal that secured his future with the franchise. Every piece of this film's production history is as thrilling as the races themselves. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Tokyo Drift is the way it was embraced by fans over time. At the box office, it may not have been an immediate hit, but over the years, it earned its place as a fan favorite. Its influence can be seen in later Fast and Furious films, with its characters, themes, and stylistic choices becoming cornerstones of the franchise. What was once viewed as an outsider film, much like Sean himself, eventually proved its worth and found its place. It wasn't about being the biggest or the flashiest. It was about proving yourself where it really mattered, on the track, behind the wheel, and in the hearts of the fans who love this saga. So, if you've made it this far, there's only one thing left to do. Hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the greatest films in cinema history. Whether it's analyzing the next Fast and Furious installment, breaking down the techniques behind legendary action sequences, or uncovering the hidden details in your favorite movies, we've got you covered. And remember, in the world of Fast and Furious, it's not just about the ride, it's about how you drift through every twist and turn.